Alright, hey everyone, I'm doing this voiceover baby wearing Henry who has the hiccups, and Audrey is playing in the background, so I apologize for any background distractions. But here is how I put together Creations by Michiè pattern 120, the Sunsuit version, and I do have a version for the dress that I will link below. Shh, Audrey. So to begin, this is optional, but if you want to do any embellishing for that collar, go ahead and do that before you cut out that pattern piece. I did some shadow work embroidered stars, and I have a detailed video that I will link below on this process. Once you are done with any optional embellishing, then you can cut out that front collar piece, and you'll also have one front collar piece for the lining too. So 2 total. Then you'll have 2 collar back pieces to cut on the folds, 2 Sunsuit front pieces, and 2 Sunsuit back pieces. First, I sewed down the center front with a French seam, and I have a detailed video linked below on how to do French seams. For those pleats at the neckline, I marked the bottom of the pleats with this friction heat activated pin. It's linked below. And I marked the top of the pleats with a little clip. And that way I can make the pleat by lining up the clips at the top and the dots at the bottom, and then I just repeat the process for all of these pleats. So after that, I joined the front to the back at the side seams with French seams, and I ironed these French seams towards the back of the garment. So moving on to the collar. Now this is an optional step, but if you want to have piping or lace, ribbon, trim, whatever on that collar, this would be the time to add that. And I am using this delightful ribbon piping stuff, and I will link it below. It is just really cute. On the front collar, I started at the shoulder seam, sewed along until I got close to the corner, and snipped where the corner goes so it'll lay nice and flat around that corner. And I put my needle down and then turned my work to continue sewing. Now remember, the seam allowances here are 5/8 of an inch, which is why my piping is moved over so much. And here is Henry's debut sewing with me. Such a sweet little boy sewing with his mama. It's like one of the best things in life. Anywho, here is the front of my collar with the optional piping embellishment, and I do the same thing for the back of the collar, but this time the piping just goes around the curve part. So before you can attach the collar to the Sunsuit, the underarm areas need to be finished. To do this, I took a 2-inch wide bias strip and folded that in half and gave it an ironing. Then I sewed it to the underarm area of the Sunsuit. Then I trimmed up those raw edges just enough so I can turn over that folded edge of the bias band and have it reach the machine stitches. I'll use these machine stitches later to hand stitch this in place. And if you've seen my videos before, you know that I like to save all of my hand sewing until the end whenever possible. So for now, I'll just iron down the band. So now I can attach the collar to the Sunsuit. I pinned the center front of the collar to the center front of the Sunsuit. Oh, and please ignore those horrible edges of the collar. I made a mistake and had to rip out some stitching, and yes, I make plenty of mistakes, and I keep that thread ripper right next to my machine. It keeps you humble. Anywho, this is what your collar will look like, and I machine sewed kind of over the top of those bias bands into place, if you will. It kind of looks like this. So then I put the lining of the front collar right sides together and sewed from one side around the shoulder, down the neckline to the other shoulder, and back to the other side. Again, just ignore those terrible edges. I had to rip out a seam. But I sewed all of these collar bits with the stitching from the piping facing up so I can stitch right on top of, or maybe slightly inside, those previous stitches. And this gives a nice, neat transition from the piping to the fabric. So then I trimmed at the corners and seam allowances, as well as clipped around the curves of the neckline. Finally, I turned the collar right sides out and used this little pointer tool, again linked below, to push out those corners before giving everything a really good ironing. I ironed the bottom edge of the lining of the collar under, since this will be hand sewn later into those machine stitches. And I repeat the same thing to the back of the collar, again lining up the center fronts together, sewing around, turning right sides out, that whole jazz. And at this point we are almost done. I turned the crotch raw edge under twice and sewed that into place. I also turned the raw edge of the legs under twice and sewed that into place. And I guess you could finish this raw edge with some lace or trim, but I just hemmed mine into place. From there, I used the snap setter to put durable snaps in the crotch, and they are great for those diaper changes. And then I put already covered buttons in the collar shoulder area. They just come covered already. They're linked below with everything else. After I finished all of that and the hand sewing, this was the finished outfit. And here is my little Henry in the 3-month size. Now I think this pattern runs a tad long in my opinion. Our babies are like in the 90+ percentile in length, and this is a smidgen big on him, so FYI. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. And as always, I appreciate y'all for watching, and I hope to catch y'all next time.